although Korea may have the luxury of being schizophrenic on this point, I don't think Taiwan has that luxury. And in addition, we see that TPP membership would be a way for Taiwan to rebalance its trade position, to be less reliant on mainland China, and to diversify its export markets. So as a result of those concerns, in the annual Taiwan White Paper that we produced, this year's was issued in the first week of June, we made a point to urge President Ma to make TPP accession a matter of a national, basically to set up a national campaign to mobilize public support for TPP membership, both to influence the general public discourse, but also to make known to the civil servants within the bureaucracy that this is the direction that the government intends to go forward in, and this will require some rethinking of many of Taiwan's policies. So President Ma initially, a few years ago, set out a 10-year time frame for joining TPP. 2 years ago, or last year, I think he reduced that to 8 years. So doing the math, it should now be 7 years according to his calendar. But even that, I think, could be dangerously long, or at least that seems too long to many members of the foreign business community. Now, we read in the press that quite recently, former Premier Chun proposed that Taiwan aim at TPP membership by 2015. And those remarks were later alluded to by Taiwan's representative in the United States, Cheng. So I don't know whether that reflects a change at this point in official policy, but it does seem that there's some rethinking of that time frame. But on the other hand, it's also unclear whether President Ma will have the political capital to move as quickly as we in the business community would like to see him do, and especially given the current complications going on between him and members of the Legislative Yuan. On the other hand, there have been some promising developments in the external environment. Taiwan is now engaging in FTA negotiations with other countries. The New Zealand pact has been signed, as we heard. Negotiations have been proceeding with Singapore. Those are both the TPP members, which I think is a good omen. And also, as you know, problems regarding access to the Taiwan market for U.S. beef products, which was the #1 irritant in the U.S.-Taiwan bilateral trade relationship, have now pretty much been resolved. And because of that, the TIPA talks were able to be resumed this March. From everything we heard from both sides, those talks went very well. And 2 working groups were set up, one on investment issues, one on technical barriers to trade, TBTs, and they're now getting down to work, which we hope will lead to further progress. But for a long time, the situation was beef was the overriding issue. This was a cartoon that we published in our white paper a few years ago. This animal blocking the way to the TIPA meeting room. So thankfully, Taiwan took action last year to resolve the biggest part of the problem, which was the presence of this feed additive, ractopamine, in almost all cattle raised in the United States. So it set a tolerance level of 10 parts per billion, which was the standard set by the Codex International group under the UN. And as a result, we were able to resume TIPA. Of those working groups that I mentioned, the first session on investment issues was already conducted through a digital video conference last month, and the one on technical barriers to trade should happen later this month. As we understand it, the first issue under TBTs is a draft resolution in Taiwan for chemical product registration. And many of the chemical manufacturers are concerned that it would compel them to reveal proprietary information, in which case they would have to withdraw their products from the market. So the TIPA process and Taiwan's readiness to be considered for joining TPP seem to be very directly related. The U.S. side, USTR and others have made it quite clear that satisfactory progress on the TIPA issues is a definite prerequisite for U.S. support for TPP. The U.S. is looking for a concrete demonstration that Taiwan is committed to accepting those high standard 21st century provisions that TPP is supposed to represent, and resolving those through the TIPA agenda is a very good way to do that. Of course, the United States stresses that it is only one of the 12 negotiating parties in TPP, that the group operates by consensus, and that newcomers later will need the agreement of all the existing parties. So that provides an opportunity for each one of the 12 to seek to resolve any outstanding bilateral issues they have with Taiwan. Still, U.S. influence and its leadership in TP, I think, are undeniable. So I think at this point, I'm going to insert some comments that were not part of my original paper, but based on some of the things that we've been talking about yesterday and today, on why it seems that Taiwan maybe has hung back. What are some of the reasons why it hasn't been more aggressive in pursuing TPP membership? And I'm sure there are more than the ones that I'm going to mention, but some that occurred to me is, one, I think there was a question in the minds of the Taiwan government officials, what if TPP doesn't succeed? You know, what if we go to all the trouble of twisting the arms of members of the bureaucracy to fall in line, pushing this through the legislature, dealing with those special interest groups that we heard about, and yet TPP drags on for many years without being ready for signature. And I think at this point, I think it should be clear that TPP is moving forward with much more momentum than people had anticipated just a year or two ago. Whether it's 2014, 2015, for conclusion, I think it should now be clear to people in Taiwan that this should not be a worry. Number two, I think would be similar to what Mignon apparently was raising. Why negotiate with yourself, basically? Why give up your bargaining chips ahead of time? Why make concessions before you actually enter negotiations? But I think to get a seat at the poker table, you have to ante up, and I think this would be part of that process. And third would be, what if Taiwan goes to all of this trouble, and then the door to TPP is shut in its face, whether for political or economic or whatever reasons? That would be embarrassing. It would be a political blow that domestically the opposition would probably take advantage of. But I think that's a risk that has to be taken. I think the dangers of staying outside of TPP will be so great that that's a risk that has to be absorbed. think what I'll do now is go ahead to talk about the risk that pork will become the next beef. Pork raised in the United States also contains the same feed additive ractopamine. And I think it became clear to us on this trip in Washington that we're not going to run into exactly the same situation. The TIFA talks won't be held up because of pork, but there could be great reluctance on the part of the U.S. government to move ahead on anything beyond TIFA, whether it's TPP for Taiwan or a bilateral investment agreement, unless this pork problem is resolved. And it's been clear that pork is certainly a very sensitive political issue in Taiwan, but it's also a political issue in the United States. And a lot of the key committee chairmen in Congress with jurisdiction over trade issues are from agricultural states. And this is something that Taiwan will have to face up to sooner or later. And today, every time the issue has come up, high-level officials in Taiwan have basically said, why is the U.S. picking on us on this? We gave you what you wanted on beef. Please leave us alone on pork. The Minister of Agriculture has even said that if pork enters the Taiwan market while he's in office, he will resign. I think this is something that will need to be rethought. For the U.S. side, it's beyond the politics. It's also considered a matter of principle that these kinds of decisions on trade issues should be handled on the basis of scientific evidence, and in this case it appears to be pure protectionism. So maybe now to get into some of the nitty-gritty issues that will certainly come up in bilateral negotiations can be found cited in great detail on the USTR website, for example. AmCham's own white paper is also a good reference. But for purposes of this discussion, let me mention some of the main items that we brought up in Washington during our door knock. So one is the foreign investment approval process in Taiwan. In particular, private equity firms in recent years have found great difficulty getting approval, especially when deals involve taking listed companies private. The approval process may become so long and drawn out that the would-be investor then withdraws the application, or the application may be rejected without a clear explanation being provided. I'm sure that this is one of the issues that will be discussed by that TIFA working group, and it could certainly also be covered by a bilateral investment agreement. Number two is the question of cross-border data flows, which is something that is an important principle, and I think in all of the recent trade agreements that the United States has been signing, including CORUS, and also would certainly show up in the TPP. But at the same time, Taiwan's Financial Supervisory Commission recently has been promoting data localization instead. The FSC called on foreign banks to submit a plan to return all of their data processing to Taiwan, and a similar discussion is starting with the life insurers. So considering the fact that USTR has this issue high on its list, it would seem very unwise for Taiwan to move in the opposite direction at this point if it